Mank is the newest movie from David Fincher and is written by his late father Jack Fincher and follows the life of Herman J. Mankiewicz as he battles an alcohol addiction as well as struggling to write Citizen Kane for Orson Welles. I was unbelievably excited for this movie purely because it is directed by David Fincher, and I genuinely think he is one of the best, most masterful directors working today. Every film I've seen of his I've loved, purely because you can tell how much precision and how methodical he was with each movie. And his craft has just got better and better with each movie that he directs. And the fact that he hasn't directed anything since 2014's Gone Girl is quite a shame, actually, because I've been wanting him to do something else since then, because Gone Girl was fantastic. It's genuinely one of my favourite Fincher films, but that's not really saying much considering almost all of his films are brilliant. But yes, I was really intrigued to see what he would do next, and the fact that he has chosen to tackle Citizen Kane, what is widely regarded as one of the best movies ever made, seemed pretty audacious, but I knew it would be capable in his hands. And I've got to say, after watching Mank, I liked it. I liked it quite a lot, but I didn't love it as much as I thought I would, and that's kind of disappointing considering I love pretty much everything I've seen of David Fincher's. This is the first movie where it hasn't necessarily clicked for me on first viewing, though there is a lot to appreciate with this film. Something didn't click with me, and I can't exactly put my finger on it. First off, though, I must talk about the positives, because there is a lot to love about this movie. For everything from a presentational and technical standpoint is perfect. I cannot fault it whatsoever. The cinematography is immaculate, it's so beautiful, and is probably one of the best looking movies I've seen all year. It so successfully and authentically captures that 1930s and 40s aesthetic, not just through its black and white look, but also through the costume design and just the general atmosphere and look of the movie is so spot on. They make it perfectly feel like you are watching a film from that time period, and the way it's shot never contradicts this, because I think it was shot in digital, but the way the movie is looked and what they've done to it in editing, they've managed to blur these very fine lines between it not looking too digital, but also not looking too heavily like it was actual film stock. And I really like that balance, because though parts of it do look slightly digital, there is always things that they've done to the film that kind of put you back into the moment and make you almost consider for a second that, oh, maybe they did shoot this on film. For example, there are cigarette burns that pop up every now and then in the top right corner of the screen, and it just adds a little bit more authenticity, not just to the presentation of the film, but to the general feel and tone of the film as well. David Fincher's directing is just as good as usual, though it isn't as stylish and slick and creeping as it usually is, and to be honest, that sort of style wouldn't necessarily work that well for this sort of film. But for the sake of this movie, I think it works very well. It almost doesn't feel like David Fincher directed this. Like, if you showed me this film and didn't tell me who directed it, I genuinely wouldn't have a clue who would have made this. But the fact that David Fincher has directed it, it doesn't necessarily feel like something he's directed. There are some moments where it does, and you get those slow-moving, panning shots that you're so used to seeing in a David Fincher film. But for the most part, it doesn't feel like something he'd direct, and I'm going to take that as a positive, because it shows that he is willing to adapt his style, because I will admit, with the last few films that he has directed, his style and his specific presentational look of his films was becoming almost a bit of a cliche and a trope. Though they were still very good and it was brilliant to look at, you could tell what a David Fincher movie looked like. So it's nice to see him going outside of his comfort zone with Mank. And whilst we're on that sort of subject, the score is the only way I can sum it up is exquisite. It's so good. The people who did this score this time is Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, who have been a pretty consistent collaborator with David Fincher ever since The Social Network. Oh, no, sorry. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. And yeah, their score for this movie sounds like unlike anything they've done before. Because pretty much most of the scores they've done for Fincher and other people in the past has been mostly synth-driven and relies a lot on ambience and atmosphere. Whereas this movie, there's strings, there's a full-on orchestra, there's even some jazz elements thrown in there, and it all fits the overall tone and feel of the movie very well, whilst perfectly emphasising that 30s and 40s aesthetic in the best way possible. Like I said, everything from a presentational standpoint is pretty faultless in my opinion, and the performances are also really, really good as well. There's tons of great performances all throughout the movie, but the two standouts for me were Gary Oldman as the title character and Amanda Seyfried as Marion Davis. These two performances almost act as like the glue for this movie to work. If these two performances weren't as good as they are, then I feel like the movie would just kind of fall apart a little bit, but you've got two very capable actors that really make these roles their own. Gary Oldman really commits to the role of Herman J. Mankiewicz, though it's kind of hard to understand what he's saying, especially in like the first half of the movie, especially during specific points. I really did like his performance, and the more the movie went on, the more I really came to understand what he was doing with that character and how he was portraying it. There are even points in the movie where you sort of do feel sorry for the character, mainly because of how dependent he is on alcohol and how that ruins certain social interactions. And yeah, that whole aspect of his performance I really, really liked. And Amanda Seyfried as Marion Davis is just really good. When I've seen her in previous movies, I've thought she's fine, but have never really seen her as an amazing actress. But here, she, again, really commits to not just the role that she is given, but, again, just emphasises that 30s and 40s feel of the movie through her accent, through the way she dresses, through her performance. And again, I just loved her performance, and her chemistry with Gary Oldman just really is one of the main selling points of this film. However, like I said at the start of the video, something about this movie didn't exactly click with me. And now that I've had a little bit of time to think about it, I think I know what it was that I didn't click with. And it's the writing. Though Citizen Kane is the perfect subject to dissect in a movie, I don't necessarily think the writing process of that film is the most interesting angle to go for a film. I would much rather see a movie that properly delves into the production and Orson Welles' side of how Citizen Kane came to be. But personally, from my perspective, the writing process of Citizen Kane, especially in this movie, just isn't as interesting of a subject matter for a film as I thought it would be. With that being said though, the last 20 or so minutes where the movie really starts to emphasise how events in this movie relate to things that happen in Citizen Kane, I absolutely loved. I couldn't get enough of it. Those last 20 or so minutes I thought were genuinely brilliant. However, everything else felt a little bit tedious to me. Listen, I admire David Fincher's work and also his choice to direct a movie that was written by his late father. But as I was watching the movie, I started to realise very quickly that maybe Herman J. Mankiewicz as a person isn't necessarily the most fascinating person to do a film about. After about 10 or so minutes, and you've got the general gist of what his character is like and how he acts, there's not really much else I was able to take away from his character. Though there is a growth for that character over the course of the movie, like I said, after a certain point, and you've got the general gist of how he acts and what he does, I genuinely didn't know what else there was to take away from him, which just kind of made the rest of the movie, again, a little bit tedious. And I'm annoyed at myself for saying this, because I've never had this issue with any other David Fincher movie, but with this movie, I feel like the writing is the one thing that let it down. The dialogue is also, though quite interesting at points, it is quite a lot to digest, especially on a first viewing. And yeah, there are some points in the movie where the dialogue kind of doesn't help its case, so to speak. But yeah, though I did like Mank overall, I really wanted to love it. And because I didn't love it, I am slightly disappointed. I feel like this movie, for me, is going to be very similar to Alfonso Cuarón's Roma. On the first viewing, I liked it quite a lot. But once I gave it more time and let it sink in a bit more and rewatched it a few times, it went up in my estimations the more that time passed. I mean, now I think Roma is a bloody masterpiece. And hopefully the same thing will happen with Mank. At this point in time, I like the movie quite a bit, but hopefully in the future I will learn to process it a bit more and love it for the movie that it is. But at this point in time, I'm going to give Mank a 7. I can see why some people love this film, and I can also see why some people are very disappointed with this movie. I can see it being nominated for a lot of Oscars, that's for sure, especially in all the technical categories. So guys, that was my review of Mank. I hope you enjoyed it, and yes, before you ask, I am aware of the Warner Brothers and HBO Max thing. At this point in time, it's too early to tell how this is going to affect cinemas in the future. I mean, there's always going to be a need and want for cinemas. I mean, if nobody wanted to go to the cinema, then they would have died out already. But the fact that they've been going this long and are still there just kind of shows how persistent they can be. And I mean, you guys know me. I would love to go back to the cinema as soon as I can. And yeah, I suppose with this HBO Max and Warner Brothers thing, only time will tell. It raises a lot of interesting possibilities, but there is also the worrying aspect of like what it could do to cinemas in the long term. But like I said, I think we just have to wait and see how this plays out. If you like the video, then give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Bye.